Hello, I'd like to welcome you to the Series 65-66 class presented by Series 7 Specialists. This is Module 1 and we'll be going over some very important information in Module 1. What I'd like for you to do is to be sure, first of all, to download the course outline from the website, series7specialists.com. And also you may want to bookmark that website. In fact, a good idea is to subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Make the videos a little bit easier to find. So in any event, we do want to go through the whole thing. This is advertiser supported, and so we do encourage you to click on those advertisements, support our sponsors, and they're the ones that make this possible. But certainly no charge to you. We certainly want to give you a full classroom experience in the Series 65 and 66. In fact, we'll be putting up more classes in the very near future, so keep with us. We're going to have about 20-minute modules, so hopefully that will be something that that you can use to plan your day and to plan your time. But in any event, we'll be, like I say, going through the whole thing. I would in fact get that course outline. If you have not done so, might want to take just a few minutes because we'll be referring to it as we go. All right, getting started, because we might as well just jump right on in. There are some critical concepts that you really have to remember as we approach the Series 65 or 66. First of all, the differences between the two used to be fairly well marked. Now they're so fuzzy and there's so much overlap, even in the areas that the old 66 did not cover. It's easiest just to run the class concurrently. Because the differences between the two are so small that you have to cover essentially all of the same information either way. But some critical concepts that we really need to look at, first of all, is to separate the idea of broker-dealers from investment advisors. Now this is something that it sounds kind of funny, but it's very important as we go through the class and through the test, because in the real world, broker-dealers, investment advisors, they're all just a big plate of spaghetti. You can't really tell where one starts and the other stops. That's because at our broker-dealer, we provide investment advisory services. We'll do some financial plans and charge that customer for the plan or get compensated. But on the test, what you want to do is you want to think about Bob's broker-dealer. Okay? Bob's broker-dealer is downtown. And they do transactions in securities. They do it as an agent and they do it as a principal. Therefore, they're a broker and a dealer. They serve both of those functions in getting transactions effected for their clients. They do so for commissions or markups. That's their business. That's it. All right? They're a broker-dealer. That's it. On the other side of town, out in the suburbs, you've got Fred's Investment Advisory Services. Fred has a business of providing advice to his clients. That's what he does, is to provide advice on securities, and does so for compensation. Whether it's direct or indirect doesn't really matter. That's all he does. Fred does not do any transactions in securities. All right. Now, the thing about it is, they may both be owned by Mega Financial Services, that umbrella company, that holding company that owns them both. Therefore, they may be affiliates of each other, but Bob is a broker-dealer and Fred is an investment advisor. And so Bob does transactions, Fred gives advice. Doing that on the test will really, really help you. All right? It's one of the things that you just have to do, because the test will ask you about a broker-dealer, or it will ask you about an investment advisor, or it may say affiliates. If you've got that mindset, it really does help you out. So that's the first thing to do, is to keep those two separate in your mind. Even though in the real world, yeah, you can make a case that they blend together. They really don't, but you can see where I'm coming from. Just separate them out from the get-go, okay? Separate federal requirements from state requirements. The two are very important, okay? And look at the terminology to see if it doesn't say federal or state. Sometimes the terminology will say what the question is talking about. Because if it's talking about a federal, for instance, a private placement, all right, and it gives you all the state requirements, those are legitimate requirements, but not for that question. They're wrong. On the other hand, if it talks about the state requirement for a private placement and it goes to talk about accredited investors, who really cares? Who really cares? Because that's a federal term. So like I say, keep those federal and state requirements, keep them separated as you look at the test questions, all right? Excuse me. In fact, the one thing that I'd like to point out is that almost every textbook, somewhere in it, has a table that lists the federal and the state requirements side by side. Spend time on that table. If I were a question writer, I could mine that little table that showed the differences between federal and state. I could sit there for hours and create question after question after question. That's what we're here to do, is to get right answers on those questions. If that's where they're taking them from, spend time there. All right, it's a really good idea. Look in your textbook, find out where it is, and just review it at least once a day, because it's just good time. It's time well invested. It's not spent, it's invested, all right? So anyway, keep your federal and your state separate. Know the terminology. I've already started to talk about this a little bit. The terminology is critical in this test, because if you don't know the terminology, a lot of times you'll not know what the question is asking. If you don't know what the question is asking, you're not going to be able to figure out what the answer is. So you've got to know your terminology. You've got to have it down absolutely, positively cold. You've heard the saying, oh, he can talk the talk, but he can't walk the walk. Hey, in this test, it's the mirror image of that, okay? We won't let him walk the walk unless and until this person shows us that he or she can talk the talk effectively and know what they're talking about. You've got to know the terminology. Definitions are critical on this test. Okay? In fact, one good exercise is to take the glossary that's in your textbook. Now, don't read the darn thing, okay? It'll put you to sleep. Instead, what I want you to do is just to start and just break it into sections. You know, maybe take one column per day, and just go through. Okay, now I'm familiar with it. Yeah, that one's that was yeah. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe I'd better just kind of brush up on that one. Okay, that's good. I feel a lot better about that. Now I know that one. I know that one. I know that one. I know that one. Well, you know, maybe I better take a couple of seconds on that one, and just become real familiar with those. Yeah, it's like I say, don't try to do it all at once. Don't read the whole thing, but that's a real good exercise for you to do to get that terminology down. You'll need to know exclusions and exemptions, to the point that in a lot of cases, what is not whatever it is we're talking about is much more important than what is whatever it is we're talking about. In fact, we'll need to know, in some cases, the difference between an exclusion and an exemption. Go figure. Hey, I didn't write the test, okay? But in any event, you need to know those exclusions, those exemptions from whatever rule it is that we're talking about. And each question has to be read carefully. It's critical, all right? I'll, in fact, kind of tack onto this one other thing that's extremely important on this test, and that's to use the process of elimination. And once you eliminate something, eliminate it forever, all right? Simplify down as quickly as you can, all right? Once you get down, usually you'll be able to get down to 2 answers. At that point, the question becomes your best friend, because what do? You go back up to the question and you mine through the question for that key word or that key phrase that turns you this way instead of that way. What does that imply that you know? The terminology, the vocabulary. See why that's so important? So you've got to know that stuff. And like I say, these are just critical concepts, because after all, really, the goal of me doing this is to help you get a passing grade. That's it. I used to love to teach people stuff. I love even more than that having people report back to me that they get a passing grade. So in any event, on Series7Specialist.com, we've got a comments page. Contact us page rather, and so let me know. Just hit the contact us page and send me an email. Tell me how you did. See if there's something that you'd like to suggest for the next folks who view it. Certainly, want to make this as friendly as possible, as complete and thorough as possible, and as test focused as possible. So hit that contact us page. Let us know how things are going, okay, and how you've done. So let's go ahead and just dive into the federal laws. Very important for us to know the federal laws. In fact, all of this stuff is very important. The way that this test, the questions are distributed, you really can't be strong over here and weak over there. You've got to be pretty good, at least, in the whole thing. So let's go ahead and dive into those federal laws. First of all, the Securities Act of '33. Now, I like to rename this one, okay, because sometimes there's a little problem in which goes with what, okay? So I like to call this one the Securities Themselves Act of 1933, because that's what the law deals with, is the stuff, the paper, the securities themselves. How do we get this idea of ownership of a corporation, which itself is kind of a strange little concept? How do we get to where this piece of paper becomes valuable enough to someone that they'll part with their hard-earned cash to buy it as evidence of ownership in a corporation? Those procedures are prescribed in the Securities Themselves Act of 1933. It deals with primary market securities. There's the 33 and the 34 Act. It's the primary year. It deals with the primary market. The 34 Act is the secondary year. It's going to deal with the secondary market. Okay, so in any event, the Paper Act, or Act of Full Disclosure, is another, other words for it, and all securities must register unless there's an exemption. In other words, unless Congress says, well, this one in particular does not need to register, and we'll talk about those exemptions at a little bit later date. But the prospectus, which is just a disclosure document, that's all it is, a full and fair disclosure of everything that could possibly affect a potential investor's decision as to whether or not to invest money in this company. That's what you're going to have in that prospectus. It is a disclosure document. That's it. It has to be in writing, and we'll see that there are delivery requirements for it. Okay, there are preliminary and final prospectuses. There are nicknames for them and other names for them, but we'll worry about that when we get there. That final prospectus for stocks or bonds, it can now be posted on the internet. In fact, we'll see in just a little bit that actually posting and confirming that your customer has access to the internet, where they can go out and pick that up on a PDF, that actually posting it on the internet is actually equivalent to a physical delivery of a physical document to that person, which makes a lot of sense and saves a lot of paper. All right, so in any event, they can be posted on the internet. Now, the registration. Okay, all registration is just making sure that we meet the requirements of the law with regard to the SEC knowing what's going on and knowing that we follow the proper procedures of proper disclosure and what have you. That act of registration begins the registration period. It's a 20-day cooling off period. Okay, 20-day cooling off period. And so that during that time, there are certain things that you can do, certain things you cannot do. And one of the things that I like to do, I've got the prohibited practices in this order for a reason, because it's been many years ago now, but everybody was walking around with those dust masks and what have you, especially over in the Far East. They were walking around because they were afraid of SARS. I can't remember what SARS stands for, but some kind of syndrome or something like that. But anyway, a respiratory symptom. Anyway, everybody was wearing those things around. Well, we want to avoid SARS at all costs. Okay, so what we don't want to do, the issues in registration, we don't want to sell, advertise, recommend, or solicit, SARS. All right, so selling, we don't want to sell it. If somebody says, hey, great idea, Dan, here's my money, and they send me a check, what do I do? If I say, okay, I'll take your money, what have I just done? I've just sold that. I can't do that. So I have to return their money to them and say, whoa, wait a minute. We'll talk money when it's going to be legal for me to sell this. All right, so I have to send it back. Yes, I know that in the real world they're going to have an integrated asset account that has the built-in money market fund, and they may make a deposit to it. We're talking about, just keep it simple. This is the only transaction that person has or will ever do with you. And so if they send in money for it, no, I've got to send it back. Because this is the test. And things are different on the test. You have to just boil things down to a very tightly compartmentalized situation or scenario on the test. We can accept non-binding indications of interest, or IOIs, you might see them called. Basically what that says, non-binding on either the broker-dealer or on the customer. And I've seen it both ways. I've seen it where the broker-dealer either didn't have enough stock or some issues were pulled. They decided not to go ahead and go through with it. Sorry folks, they're not going to go through with it. Didn't have enough stock, whatever. I've seen it where a customer said, yeah, I'm interested, so let me look over the prospectus though. They look it over, second thought, I don't think that this is for me. That's okay, there's no penalty on it, assuming that we haven't hit the effective date. Okay, so they're non-binding indications of interest. We can accept those. We cannot advertise the thing. There's one kind of advertising that is allowable during the cooling off period, and that's what they call a tombstone ad. Now, they're called tombstone ads because, frankly, they kind of look like tombstones. Here lies, da-da-da, that's a great guy, but he's a goner now. And basically what happens, you don't see these a lot anymore because they're really kind of expensive and of very little value. So what happens? You've got the company up here, XYZ, and it says that you've got so many shares or bonds or whatever it is that the company is selling to the public. And then there's a little disclaimer right in here that this is not an offer to sell nor solicitation of an offer to buy. Why? We can't do that. All right? Okay. Such solicitation is only made by the means of the prospectus. And a prospectus may be obtained by contacting the undersigned. And what you have then is the manager of the offering here. You have the, if there's a co-manager, they'll both be there in pretty big type. You'll have the syndicate members here in a little smaller type, okay, that are putting their money at risk. All right, and then you'll have the selling group down here in yet smaller type in alphabetical order. They're not putting their money at risk, they're just hired guns to sell the stuff. And basically, that's it. There's your tombstone ad. Those are legal to be run during the cooling off period. In the real world, when they do run these, typically what they do is to do them on the effective date, so it doesn't really make that much difference anyway. Excuse me, but this is the test. Right? So we concern ourselves with the test. So don't advertise. This is allowable though, the tombstone ad. All right, recommendations. So don't send out research reports. Don't send out research reports from another company. Don't send out an article that you saw in New Issue magazine. Okay, just don't. Anything that could possibly be construed as advertising, don't do it. And like I say, don't recommend it. And then so don't sell, advertise, recommend, or solicit those new issues in registration. Like we say, the only means of solicitation is right here on the tombstone ad, is by sending out that preliminary prospectus. Now, does that mean that you cannot talk to your customer and say, look, I sent you a prospectus, did you get it? Yeah, I got it, looked it over. What do you think? Would you like for me to put you down for some, an indication of interest for some of them? You can do that. You can conduct business, but you can't solicit it based on anything other than that prospectus. And of course, you'll see that you cannot mark on the prospectus. It's a disclosure document. So like I say, if you make a mark on it, what you're doing is you're saying, look, this thing that I've highlighted right here, this is more important than anything else on the other 92 pages in this booklet. No, it's all important. Okay, so don't mark on it or anything like that. That would be soliciting. That would be advertising. You would defeat the purpose of that prospectus. Tombstone ads we just talked about. They can, on corporate offerings, they announce the offering. Just like this. Excuse me, one of the problems we get into with mutual funds in particular is that mutual funds are continuously in an offering period. They only issue new shares. So they're in registration all the time. You've got to kind of tweak the rules a little bit to allow for those, and you've got Rule 482, which allows what's called an omitting prospectus. And now, omitting sounds like a verb. No, it's an adjective. What kind of prospectus is this? Omitting prospectus, because it omits this much information. All right, what it does is that it says, this is a cool mutual fund, you really ought to check into it. Everything, including fees, expenses, all those considerations are in the prospectus, which can be obtained by your broker-dealer. Read it carefully before you invest or send money. Look at any mutual fund ad in any newspaper. That's a 482 omitting prospectus is what it is. Those are allowable because, again, we have to do business. The old saying, mutual funds are sold, not bought, it's very true. So we have to conduct business, and that's how we do it, and that's how we adapt the business to, or the rules, to the way that we do business. So I'll tell you what, we've gone through page 1. We could talk about the allowed activities, but really it's kind of something that probably best to go ahead and take a break here to keep those modules down to the 20-minute mark. So when we come back, we'll start up at the top of page 2 with allowed activities. All right, we'll see you in a few minutes.